You ever have one of those mornings where you're just sitting there, feeling like life's finally settled, and out of nowhere you realize you've actually been sitting on a powder keg the whole time? Yeah, that was us, Natasha and me, feeding ducks at the edge of Pine Ridge Lake, thinking we'd made it. And then Crystal Fairmont showed up on our dock, high heels clicking like gunshots, clipboard in hand, wearing that permanent tight-lipped smile people reserve for IRS agents or ex-wives they hate. If you've ever tangled with an HOA Karen, you know exactly where this is headed, except, trust me, you have no idea. That clipboard was about to unleash hell. Now, I couldn't have predicted that 3 weeks later, Crystal would be hauled off in cuffs by the FBI, or that the woman everyone saw as my gentle, anxious wife, the weak housewife, as Crystal liked to say, was actually running the longest con of anyone in the neighborhood. No, at that moment, I thought we were the harmless new couple, just looking for a little peace. Let me back up a sec, you know? I'm Troy Davidson, 45, ex-park ranger, retired after a back injury took out my spine, but, I guess, not my spirit. 3 years ago, Natasha and I scraped together our savings and bought this rundown little cabin on the lake. Not fancy, but it was ours, wildflowers growing wherever they pleased. A dock that moaned every time you stepped on it. Neighbors who mostly minded their business. We'd spent years cramped up in city apartments. So every morning felt like a vacation, sunlight hitting the water just right. Natasha curled up outside with her laptop, supposedly healing from burnout after her fraud investigator job. That's what I thought anyway. At first, Pine Ridge Lake was pure Midwest charm. There was Dottie, the retiree who knew everyone's business, always dropping off tomatoes or neighborhood gossip. Bob Henderson, a golf nut with way too much time on his hands. And then there was Crystal, living in her giant, magazine-perfect house at the end of the street, head of the HOA Compliance Committee, running things like her personal fiefdom for the past 5 years. Word was, she'd saved the community from developers once, and now folks treated her like some benevolent dictator. Until she set her sights on us. The morning Crystal appeared, it was all blue sky, lake breeze, and peace. Until her heels started crunching up the gravel. She didn't bother with hellos. Just, I need to conduct a compliance inspection. Numerous violations have been reported. That clipboard, man, you'd think it was a badge. She rattled off this ridiculous list. Our dock was 3 inches over the setback line. Our cabins with our bird feeders were a wildlife risk. I tried to reason, said everything was permitted when we bought the place, but she just gave me this cold little smile and turned to Natasha. Your wife seems overwhelmed by business matters. Maybe the adults should handle this, she said, like Natasha was 5. And that's where the whole thing shifted. Instead of getting riled up, Natasha put on this sweet, clueless act and asked Crystal for copies of the financials, so I can learn. Even I almost believed her. Crystal lapped it up, handed her a business card like it was a golden ticket. But here's the kicker. Natasha had already spotted holes in Crystal's stories and was running calculations in her head before I'd even finished my coffee. She'd spent years chasing frauds, and I never saw her more alive than when she started poring over those HOA documents. That night, I found her up at 2 a.m., hunched over a pile of printouts. Eyes lit up like a hunter closing in on her target. Troy, Crystal made a very interesting mistake today, she said, and I felt a chill. Something big was coming. The next morning, a fat envelope of violation notices landed in our mailbox, 47 of them, totaling $12,000 in fines. You ever get hit with $12,000 for feeding ducks and staining your house brown? Yeah, that happened. Each notice was more absurd than the last. Wildflowers attracting undesirable wildlife, bird feeders creating safety risks, Adirondack chairs violating harmony guidelines. I was ready to pay just to end it. But Natasha spread Crystal's documents across the kitchen like it was a murder case. She found bank statements, vendor contracts, business registrations, $30,000 to Lakeside Innovations LLC, run by Crystal's dead husband. Dead men don't cash checks, Natasha said, and suddenly, it all snapped into focus. Crystal had been siphoning HOA money through shell companies, landscaping, maintenance, consulting, all in her late husband's name. And everyone just trusted her. Crystal's next move was classic misdirection. She organized a community safety forum, to put us on trial in front of the whole neighborhood. She showed up with her lawyer boyfriend, Preston Wickham, real smooth operator, always threatening foreclosure with a smile. The crowd mostly sat silent, except Bob, who grandstanded about trailer park standards and how we were destroying the community. It stung. People we waved to every day were ready to lynch us over flower color. But Natasha was 2 steps ahead, recording everything, taking notes, catching every lie. When Crystal bragged about fiscally responsible management, Natasha asked, all sweet, "How much did landscaping go up this year?" That question made Preston's smile twitch. But he brushed it off, until Natasha followed up about lakeside innovations and watched them exchange a look colder than the lake in December. Later, Dottie slipped Natasha a folder, 3 years of old HOA records she'd kept just in case. Turns out, the missing money was even bigger, $89,000 vanished through fake companies. Preston's law firm had approved it all, making the fraud look legit. Natasha had built a bulletproof federal case, but Crystal wasn't about to go quietly. Next thing, security cameras popped up aimed right at our house. Neighbors started giving us the cold shoulder, and Bob organized a petition to have us kicked out. Crystal raised our fines to $20,000, tacked on $50 a day for noncompliance, and Preston started sending legal threats. It was psychological warfare, meant to break us, bankrupt us, force us to sell. The final straw was when I came home and found Preston inside our house, inspecting for safety violations, claiming our bird feeder was a threat. He handed me a restraining order, said Natasha's questions were harassment. I wanted to give up, sell everything, but Natasha was just gearing up for war. She'd been documenting every detail, preparing evidence for federal mail and wire fraud. The moment she called the FBI and spoke to Agent Martinez, I realized she was dead serious. Martinez showed up, went through everything with surgical precision. Within days, bank accounts were frozen, the investigation went public, and Crystal started burning papers in her backyard like it was Watergate. Preston fought dirty. He faked evidence that Natasha was a serial false accuser, filed complaints with the FBI, spread rumors that destroyed her reputation overnight. For 2 days, Natasha barely moved from the couch, her confidence shattered. That's when I knew I had to step up. I used everything I'd learned as a ranger, scanning for tracks, catching the smallest inconsistencies. I dug into Preston's fake documents and found digital fingerprints, all created in the last 2 weeks, right after the investigation started. I pulled his bar records, saw he'd been sanctioned for sleazy legal tricks before. It was enough. I brought it to Agent Martinez, and you could hear the click when everything locked into place. Martinez called, excited, said they'd caught Preston tampering with evidence, a federal crime. The FBI set up a sting. Natasha organized a fake community cleanup, hinting she had new evidence. Crystal and Preston walked right into the trap, offering us hush money, confessing their whole scheme on a wire while FBI agents listened from a van. The next morning, at the cleanup, Crystal tried to rally the crowd, but Bob found his conscience, admitted Crystal had told him to lie and organize against us. Crystal lost it, screamed about all the money she deserved, and started shaking Natasha right in front of the crowd. That's when Agent Martinez stepped out, badge flashing, and arrested Crystal and Preston for wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Preston tried to run, wiped out on the grass, briefcase and dignity scattered. When it was over, neighbors apologized. Dottie hugged Natasha. People admitted they'd been fooled. That night, Natasha told me the real story. She'd never been burned out. She'd picked Pine Ridge Lake because she'd tracked Crystal's frauds across the Midwest. Our move, the helpless act. Even the innocent questions, she'd orchestrated everything to bring Crystal down. It was shocking, but it made sense. She did it for justice, and for the people Crystal had hurt. A year later, Crystal's rotting in federal prison, 15 years for fraud, money laundering, and environmental crimes. Preston's barred from law, serving 10. Bob's treasurer now, Dottie's on the board. The HOA runs with total transparency. Property values are up, the wetlands are safe, and Natasha trains investigators all over the state. Sometimes, the real hero isn't the one making noise. It's the quiet woman everyone underestimates. If you're still here, let me ask, what do you think? Is it ever right to become the villain to bring down a greater evil? Tell me in the comments. Where do you stand on justice, community, and standing up for what's right. Even when everyone turns against you. You know what I mean?